And that lab will be on all these media, selective and differential media, the IMVIC test, all this stuff we've been doing, and you need to know like what media selects for certain things and what genus and species of a bacteria that on some of them it's pretty evident. Yeah, in the test, because I'm kind of patterning after your lab practicum, so you take heart. And with the lab practicum, all your information is coming out of your noggin. There's no going back to stations, there's no anything. You got 90 seconds at each station with your pencil. Okay, so let's get started. Chapter 19 is on diseases that are associated with the immune system. So hypersensitivity or allergy is an inappropriate response to an antigen that leads to tissue damage rather than to immunity. And it occurs in individuals that have been previously exposed to the antigen. And when we're talking about allergies, we can also say interchange allergen for antigen. So they've already been sensitized to the antigen. So the very first time you get sensitized to an antigen, you're not going to have symptoms, but your body is making antibodies against that antigen. And so the next time that you get exposed to it, then you have symptoms. So don't worry about copying this one down. Just let me tell you about this. We're going to go over 4 hypersensitivities, and it's type 1 through type 4. And so you will need to know that type for your test, that type 2 is cytotoxic, and type 4 is cell-mediated, and what all these things are. But we're going to go over those. But what I want to show you is the first 3 types of hypersensitivity, that anaphylactic, the cytotoxic, and the immune complex. Those are all based on humoral immunity. So when we say humoral immunity, what type of cell are we talking about?
B cells.
The B cell. Those are lymphocytes. Humoral immunity is the B cell lymphocyte that will get sensitized to an antigen, and then a T helper cell is going to come along and help it make clones of itself that are sensitized to this antigen. And then it is going to produce cells called plasma cells that are going to produce the antibody. It isn't the B cell that makes the antibody. The B cell makes a plasma cell, and the plasma cell makes the antibody, and then the antibody goes into your circulation. The last one is cell-mediated. So when we say cell-mediated, what cell are we talking about? The T cell. Yeah. Okay, so let's get started on this. So type 1, so I want you to know, if I put type 1 there, you're going to be able to pick out which one of these types go with type 1. So type 1 is anaphylactic. It's an immediate hypersensitivity. Get a reaction between 2 and 30 minutes. So an antigen enters the body, and that could be a bee stings you, or you got a shot of penicillin, and then your immune system responds, and those B cells revert to or make plasma cells, and then the plasma cells produce an antibody. And for allergies, the antibody that gets produced, and you need to know this, is IgE. That is the one that is associated with allergies. So the IgE antibody binds to the surface of either a mast cell or basophils, and both of those cells have those cytoplasmic granules inside of them, and those granules then contain the chemical mediators such as histamine. And histamine is what produces the symptoms of the allergies. So the mast cells are found in the mucosal and connective tissue of the skin, the respiratory tract, and the surrounding blood vessels. Just to give you a little background there. You need to know number 3 for sure. Basophils, those circulate in the bloodstream. Those are part of your formed elements, or whatever they're called, your blood, different blood cells. And so they go right to the infection site. They're already moving along in your blood, and when you get an infection, those chemical mediators draw that blood cell to that area. The antigen binds to that IgE antibody that is on the mast cell or the basophil, and then when the antigen binds to the 2 adjacent antibodies on the cell, then the cell that causes the cell to lose those granules or go through degranulation. Both those cells have granules inside them that have chemical mediators in them. So degranulation is when the granules leave the cell and they release those chemical mediators. An example of one of the types of chemical mediators is histamine, and histamine then is what causes the symptoms. And so then the person becomes highly sensitized to that antigen. And the symptoms occur rapidly if you get re-exposed, because now, once your cells are sensitized to it, they don't have to go through that part where the B cell is making clones and antibodies, because you already have that in your system. So it's a faster response to the re-exposure. So here's showing you your B cell, and here's the allergen that is coming in. And on the B cell, we have antibodies that are surface receptors, right? One of those is IgD, so it's immunoglobulin. And so the allergens are going to hook up with that receptor site on the antibody. And remember, we need a T helper cell to help that B cell. It's also going to hook up to the B cell receptors, and it's going to cause the B cells then to make many cells of itself that are sensitized already to this antigen. And when that happens, then after the B cell gets the help from the T helper cell, then the B cell is going to make clones of plasma cells. And then the plasma cells are going to produce the antibodies. And that is with so then these antibodies that got produced, they're going to come over to the mast cell or the basophil, and they're going to hook up to the receptor sites on that cell, and it's going to cause this cell then to, when the antigens come to hook up with the antibodies, it's going to cause this cell, when it goes in between 2 antibodies, going to cause the cell to lose its chemical mediators, and then that histamine goes out into the bloodstream and causes symptoms. And histamine contracts the smooth muscles of the bronchioles, and that makes it difficult to breathe and causes vasodilation and capillary permeability. Your symptoms are swelling. You can get a hive like rash, burning, itching. If you have a food allergy, you might get cramps. And if you have